in the dag nabbit does inflation have to do with the housing market? Well, we're going to talk about that today, and something that really might help you out if you are a potential buyer or a potential seller in this last quarter of 2023. I want you to pay attention to something that might be coming up in the housing market. So stay tuned. Wondered how inflation impacts the housing market? Well, believe it or not, they are connected. So whenever there are changes in one of them, both are affected. And today, I'm going to give you an overview of the connection between the two. So welcome everybody to this YouTube channel. I appreciate you spending your valuable time, because I know it's valuable, to tune in. And if you get some value from these videos, please, I'd really appreciate it if you would press that thumbs up and subscribe so that you're alerted every week when a new video is available. So what is the relationship between housing inflation and overall inflation? Shelter inflation is the measure of price growth specific to housing, and it comes from a survey of renters and homeowners that's done by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So this survey asks renters how much they're paying in rent, and it also asks homeowners how much they'd rent their homes for if they weren't living in them. So much like overall inflation measures the cost of everyday items, shelter inflation measures the cost of housing. And for 4 months, consecutive months, based on that survey, shelter inflation has been coming down. Why does this matter? Well, shelter inflation makes up about 1/3 of overall inflation as measured by the Consumer Price Index. When shelter inflation moves, it leads to noticeable moves in overall inflation. That means that the recent dip in shelter inflation might be a sign, a good sign, that overall inflation could fall in the months ahead. So keep that in mind.
You just blew my mind.
So that moderation would be, of course, a welcome sight for the Federal Reserve. They've been working, of course, as you know, to get inflation under control since early 2022. Now, while they have made some headway, I believe it peaked at about 8.9% in the middle of last year, 2022. They're still trying to get to their 2% goal. And I think the most recent one was about 3.3%. So we're almost there.
Are we there yet?
No.
And what's the Fed been doing to lower inflation? Well, as you know, they've been increasing the federal funds rate. That interest rate influences how much it costs banks to borrow money from each other. You know, like borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, that kind of thing.
Well, I didn't want to ask you, Clark, but could you maybe spare a little, extra cash?
Sure, Eddie. How much you need?
About $52,000.
Now, when inflation climbed, the Fed responded by raising the federal funds rate to keep the economy from overheating. So check out this graph here. It's going to show the relationship between the two. Each time inflation, which is that little blue line, starts to climb, go higher, the Fed raises the federal funds rate, which is the orange line, to try to get it back to their target of 2%. So the circled portion of this graph shows the most recent spike in inflation and the Fed's actions to raise the federal funds rate to fight that. It's also showing the moderation of inflation that happened in response to that hike. So as inflation gets closer to the Fed's current 2% goal, they may not need to raise the federal funds rate much further. So I want you to pay attention to that. If you are thinking about buying a home or thinking about selling your home, because that might be a great window of opportunity for you to jump in there, take advantage if that happens. So here's another interesting aspect about this chart. If you look down to the left over here, you'll see that huge area where inflation was even higher than we've been experiencing for the last few years. And of course, this was back in the 1980s. I know that seems like a million years ago. Believe me, I was a kid and a teenager in the 1980s. And while we were, coiffing up our hair with a bunch of Aquanet.
For your money, for your money.
And wearing stupid clothing. And yeah, look at this picture of me. Whew, yeah, that's dreadful. Look at that hair. Woo, yowza. But while we were, watching MTV.
Want my MTV.
I want my MTV.
I want my MTV.
I want my MTV.
24 hours a day on cable TV.
Paying attention to The Breakfast Club and listening to the Police sing Roxanne.
Roxanne!
Our parents were experiencing the worst inflation that probably they'd experienced as adults at that time. And I remember my parents finding a home that I believe their interest rate was they were in the teens. They were really struggling in the 80s. Inflation was really bad. So we don't have it that bad now.
Not bad. Not bad at all.
So what does this all mean for you? Well, while the actions that are coming from the Fed, coming out of the Fed, they don't determine mortgage rates, they do have an impact, which we've all seen. As Mortgage Professional America explains, both mortgage rates and inflation are connected, however, indirectly. When inflation rises, mortgage rates rise to keep up with the value of the US dollar. When inflation drops, listen here, mortgage rates follow suit. So this is what I want you to pay attention to in this last quarter of 2023. Because if this does happen and we see that inflation rate get to that 2% that the Fed really, really, really wants, then we're going to see mortgage rates follow suit. And that's going to be a real game changer for many of you who've kind of gotten out of the game. You're on the fence now. You're waiting for something to happen. I sure hope that it does, but this might be an opportunity. So in order for you to know if this is a time for you as a buyer to jump off the fence and get back in the market, maybe take advantage while those rates are a little bit lower, it'll certainly help you in your monthly mortgage payment. It'll also give you more buying power when you're ready to buy. And if you are a seller and you're thinking, hey, that could really benefit me, because what does that do when the rates go lower? More buyers come into the market. And so, it might be great for your home to be on the market in that time frame. So let's both pay attention to what's happening with that inflation amount this last quarter of 2023. And of course, I'm going to be here to tell you what's going on, so you can always tune in. Hopefully you will be. But we're going to watch this together and see if that happens.
I'll say a little prayer for you.
And of course, it's true, no one can predict the future for mortgage rates. It is encouraging, however, to see the signs of moderating inflation in our economy. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, I just want to make sure you're staying informed about this housing market. And if you have any questions about anything, about whether to sell or whether to buy or to wait it out or whatever, definitely give me a ring. I'd love to chat with you and find out what your thoughts are, what might be bringing you to these areas, or maybe you already live here and you need to downsize, maybe you need to upsize. Let's talk about what's going on in the market and see what's best for you and your family. And again, I really appreciate you liking this video and subscribing to this YouTube channel so I can keep this content coming at you. I'm Catherine Newman. I look forward to talking to you next week. See you then.